The morning I signed away everything my husband had built, his sons smiled like men who had just conquered a kingdom. They thought they were watching a grieving widow surrender. They thought I was weak, confused, too broken by loss to understand what I was doing. Even my own attorney leaned toward me and whispered, "Colleen, please, don't do this." But I signed anyway. I signed every page. The house, the company, the lake property, the accounts. All of it. Sydney smirked. Edwin exhaled with relief. Their wives looked at each other with the greedy sparkle of people already planning shopping trips and vacations. Then their lawyer turned to the final page. His face drained of color. He read the hidden clause twice. Then he looked at them and said quietly, "You need to understand what you've just inherited." That was the moment their smiles died. Stay with me until the end of the story, because some betrayals are so cruel they deserve justice no court could ever design. And tell me in the comments what city you're watching from. I'd love to know how far this story has traveled. The funeral flowers were still fresh when they came for me. 3 days after I buried my husband, Floyd, I was sitting in his study, wrapped in a blanket I didn't remember pulling around my shoulders, staring at the empty chair across from me where he used to sit and read. 22 years. 22 years of marriage. 22 years of laughter, arguments, shared meals, road trips, bad dancing in the kitchen, whispered conversations in the dark. And now the house sounded wrong without him. Every room felt like a memory that had forgotten how to breathe. Then Sydney and Edwin arrived. Floyd's sons from his first marriage. I had known them since they were young men, but they had never accepted me. I was tolerated at holidays, endured at birthdays, and politely ignored in family photos. Still, I believed grief might soften them. I was wrong. Sydney entered first, with an expensive coat, polished shoes, and an expensive watch. He looked like a man arriving for a business acquisition. Edwin followed, shoulders hunched, eyes moving around the room like he was already measuring what could be sold. Neither hugged me. Neither asked how I was sleeping. Neither said they missed their father. Sydney glanced at the tea tray on the table and said, "We should keep this brief." I stared at him. "My father's estate needs to be handled efficiently," he continued. "We all know emotions complicate these things. My husband had been dead for 72 hours. And his son was annoyed by emotions. What do you want?" I asked. He opened a leather folder. Dad's will. I felt a small thread of relief. Floyd had told me many times everything was arranged. That I would always be secure. That I would never have to worry. He had held my hand in the hospital and whispered, "You'll be taken care of." I believed him. Sydney began reading. Sacramento is home to Sydney and Edwin. The Lake Tahoe property to Sydney and Edwin. The business holdings are divided between Sydney and Edwin. Investment interests in Sydney and Edwin. I waited for the part about me. It never came. Finally, Edwin cleared his throat. "There is a life insurance policy," he said. $200,000. I laughed. Not because it was funny. Because my mind rejected what I was hearing. $200,000. After 22 years of marriage. After leaving my career to support Floyd's growing company. After managing the home, hosting clients, caring for him through surgeries, appointments, and the final brutal months of illness. $200,000. And the medical bills, Sydney added casually. What medical bills? Approximately $180,000. The room went still. They'll need to be paid. With what? He gave me a patient smile. With the insurance proceeds, naturally. That left me with $20,000. $20,000 and 30 days to leave my home. Edwin folded his hands. "We know this is difficult. But Dad always believed family assets should stay in the bloodline." Bloodline. I looked at the two men in front of me. Men I had cooked for. Supported. Defended to their father. Celebrated. Men who called me family whenever they needed something. Now I was not a family. I was an obstacle. "You can stay 30 days, Sydney said. "We think that's fair." Fair. I nodded slowly. "I need time." "Of course," he said, standing. "But don't drag this out." They left. Through the window, I watched them laughing near their cars. Laughing. The day they stripped their father's widow of everything. I sat alone in Floyd's study until sunset. Then I opened the center drawer of his desk. Inside were receipts, pens, stamps, an old lighter he no longer used. And beneath them, a brass key. Small, heavy, worn smooth by years of handling. There was no label, no explanation, just the strange certainty that Floyd wanted me to find it. I closed my hand around the key, and for the first time since his death, I felt something stronger than grief. Purpose. The next morning I met with Martin Hale, the attorney who had supposedly prepared Floyd's will. Martin was in his 60s, polished, intelligent, visibly uncomfortable. He had represented Floyd for years. He looked sick when I walked in. "Colleen," he said softly. "I'm so sorry." I sat down. Did Floyd really leave me nothing? He hesitated too long. Then said, "The will presented by Sydney is legally executed." "Presented by Sydney?" He rubbed his forehead. "They contacted me after Floyd passed and requested copies." "Did Floyd instruct you to work through them?" Another hesitation. "No." Something inside me sharpened. "Martin, did Floyd ever express concern for my future?" "All the time." "Then why would he do this?" He leaned forward. "Because I don't believe he did." The room became very quiet. "There are irregularities," he said carefully. "Timing issues. Revisions I was not consulted on. Signatures that appear valid, but the circumstances are troubling. Can we fight it?" "Yes." "How long?" "Months. Possibly years." "With what money?" He said nothing. I placed the brass key on his desk. "Do you know what this opens?" He looked at it and frowned. Then his eyes widened. "Where did you get this?" "Floyd's desk." Martin stood so fast his chair rolled backward. "Come with me." It opened a safety deposit box at First National Bank downtown. The account had both our names. Only Floyd and I had access. Martin looked stunned. "He never mentioned this," he murmured. Inside the box were folders. Documents. USB drives. A sealed letter addressed in Floyd's handwriting. "For Colleen. Open only after the boys show their true faces." My hand shook. I opened it. "My dearest Colleen. If you are reading this, then I was right. I prayed I was wrong. For years, I excused their selfishness as immaturity. Their greed is insecurity. Their entitlement stems from childhood wounds. But in my illness, they revealed themselves completely. They are trying to steal from you. And worse, they have already been stealing from me. Everything you need to know is in this box. Trust Martin. Trust yourself. And forgive me for not telling you sooner. I needed proof before I accused my own sons. I love you beyond death. Floyd." I couldn't breathe. Martin silently handed me tissues. Then we opened the folders. Bank records showed Sydney had used forged authorizations to borrow against company assets. Edwin had diverted client funds through shell companies. There were emails between them discussing Floyd's declining health and how to secure the estate before Colleen understands anything. There was surveillance evidence. Signed confessions drafted during failed negotiations. And there was something else. A newer will. Dated 6 weeks before Floyd's death. Legally valid. Witnessed properly. It revoked all previous wills. It left everything to me. Every asset. Every account. Every property. With one final clause. I grant my wife, Colleen Whitaker, sole discretion to decide whether my sons receive any inheritance whatsoever. I cried so hard I thought I would split open. Not from money. From relief. From love. From knowing he had not abandoned me. He had been protecting me. Then Martin opened the final folder. Mortgage records. The Sacramento home, heavily leveraged. The Tahoe property, leveraged. The business, debt instruments attached. I frowned. What is this? Martin stared. Then laughed once in disbelief. Oh, Floyd. What? He moved most of the liquid assets out years ago into protected accounts only you control. How much? He looked at the statements. Then at me. Approximately 5.7 million. I sat down hard. But the houses are worth less than the debt attached to them. I stared. You mean if Sydney and Edwin inherit those properties? They inherit the liabilities. I covered my mouth. Floyd. Even dying, he was 10 moves ahead. That afternoon, Sydney called. "Mother," he said sweetly, a word he only used when he wanted something. "We've arranged final papers. Let's settle this quickly." "Of course," I said. "We're glad you're being reasonable. I've learned from the best." He laughed, not understanding. We scheduled the final hearing for Friday. 3 days away. 3 days in which they celebrated publicly. They told friends they were taking over the company. Edwin's wife posted a photo at the lake house captioned, "New Beginnings." Sydney called contractors to renovate my home before I had even moved out. I said nothing. I packed quietly. Not because I had to. Because I wanted to. I boxed only what mattered. Photographs. Letters. The rest could stay. I was leaving grief behind with the furniture. Friday arrived bright and cold. We met in a private conference room. Sydney wore navy. Edwin wore arrogance. Their wives came too, dressed like victory. Martin sat beside me. Across from us, their attorney, a younger man I didn't know, shuffled papers. Sydney smiled. "Ready to do the right thing?" "I am." I signed transfer acknowledgements. I signed disclaimers. I signed the property acceptance documents. I signed everything placed in front of me. Martin looked miserable. When I finished, I folded my hands. "There," Sydney said happily. "Done." "Not quite," said Martin. He slid over the final packet. "The inheritance acceptance clause. Required for beneficiaries assuming titled assets." Sydney signed first. Edwin signed second. Their wives beamed. Then their attorney began reading the attached schedules. His expression changed. He turned pages faster. Then slower. Then he stopped. "What is this?" Sydney asked. The lawyer looked up. "These properties carry outstanding obligations. So the mortgage debt exceeds market value." Silence. "The Sacramento property has a $1.2 million balance." Sydney blinked. "That's impossible. The Tahoe property carries $800,000. Edwin laughed nervously. "Fine. We sell them." The lawyer swallowed. "Combined equity is negative." Their smiles vanished. "And the company?" Sydney snapped. Martin answered. "The operating company was separated from the real estate portfolio 18 months ago. What you inherited is the debt-holding entity." Sydney stood up so violently that his chair crashed backward. "You tricked us." I met his eyes. "No. Your father understood you." Edwin turned pale. "There must be other assets." "There are," I said. "But they belong to me." I placed the new will on the table. Martin had already filed it that morning. Sydney grabbed it, scanned it, then looked like a man discovering gravity for the first time. "No." "Yes. You forged this." Martin spoke calmly. "It has been authenticated and entered." Edwin began sweating through his shirt. "You can't do this to us." I tilted my head. "Can't I?" Their attorney cleared his throat. "There is more." No one moved. He continued. "Attached evidence packets indicate potential fraud exposure involving both beneficiaries. Mrs. Whitaker has agreed not to pursue immediate civil claims contingent upon full compliance today." Sydney stared at me. "You'd ruin your family?" I almost pitted him. "You ruined yourselves." Edwin's wife started crying. Sydney's wife whispered, "You said there was money." He ignored her. Sydney leaned toward me. "What do you want?" I thought of hospital nights, of unpaid loyalty, of laughter in the driveway, of 30 days to leave my home. Then I thought of Floyd's letter. "I want peace," I said. "You'll sign acceptance of what your father chose to leave you. You'll resign all claims against me. You'll never contact me again." "And if we refuse?" Martin answered. "Then litigation begins Monday. Criminal referrals follow." They signed. Hands shaking. No one looked triumphant now. As they left, Sydney paused. "This isn't over." I smiled sadly. "It ended when you chose greed over love." I sold both properties within 6 months through negotiated settlements. Because I controlled the liquid assets, I cleared the debts strategically, retained value, and closed every account tied to Floyd's old structure. I sold the company to a respected competitor who kept long-time employees. I gave bonuses to staff who had stood by Floyd during his illness. Many cried. One receptionist hugged me and said, "He'd be proud of you." I hope so. Then I bought a cottage overlooking the Pacific in Carmel. White walls, blue shutters, a wild garden, windows that opened to sea air. For the first time in decades, every decision belonged only to me. I planted roses. I learned watercolor. I walked on beach at sunrise. I read books slowly. I laughed without apologizing for it. Some evenings I sat on the porch with tea and talked to Floyd out loud. I told him about the gulls, the tomatoes growing badly, the way the ocean sounded different every night. And I always ended the same way. You were right about them. Then softer. But you were right about me too. News of the Suns reached me in fragments. Sydney declared bankruptcy after creditors came calling. His marriage ended within the year. Edwin faced lawsuits from former clients and moved into a rented apartment far from the neighborhoods he once bragged about. Neither contacted me. Wise choice. I felt no joy in their suffering. Only closure. Because revenge is loud. Justice is quiet. Justice lets you sleep. One spring afternoon, while trimming lavender by the gate, a woman in her 30s approached with cautious eyes. Mrs. Whitaker? Yes. I'm Sarah Hale, Martin's daughter. She smiled nervously. My father said you might understand something. We sat in the garden. She ran a nonprofit helping women escape financial abuse. Partners who controlled accounts, isolated them, used money as a weapon. As she spoke, I saw my own past more clearly. Not because Floyd abused me, he did not. But because I had slowly disappeared inside everyone else's needs. I had mistaken usefulness for identity. I had let family define my worth. How can I help? I asked. Her eyes brightened. That year I funded legal aid clinics, emergency housing grants, and education workshops. We named it the Whitaker Foundation. Not for wealth. For warning. No one should be trapped because they cannot afford freedom. Sometimes people ask if I regret not reconciling with Sydney and Edwin. No. Reconciliation requires remorse. They wanted access, not forgiveness. There is a difference. I do wish things had been different. I wish Floyd had healthy sons. I wish greed had not hollowed them out. I wish holidays had been real. But wishing does not rewrite character. Choices do. And they made theirs. The last letter from Floyd stays in my bedside drawer. The paper has softened with time. I know every line by heart. Especially the ending. Live fully, my love. Do not become a shrine to my absence. So I didn't. I became a garden. I became an ocean view. I began laughing with new friends. I became useful to strangers. I became myself. If you're listening to this story while someone is trying to make you feel small, powerless, replaceable, hear me carefully. Sometimes, the people who underestimate you hand you the perfect opportunity to rise. Sometimes losing the house saves the woman. Sometimes signing the papers is not surrender. Sometimes it is strategy. And sometimes the widow everyone pities is the only one in the room who knows how the story ends. So tell me, what would you have done in my place? And have you ever seen greed destroy the very people who worshipped it? Thank you for staying until the end.